Hi folks, and welcome back. My last video ended with simple circuit boards on rails at approximately 50 hours of playtime. In this video I'm going to show you how the next 25 hours did go, where I continued on my way towards Py2. In the past, when looking at my base, I noticed a few mistakes and possible improvements. Logistic science packs have stopped because they ran out of ash, and there is an opportunity to make more asphalt, if it had some ash. This professional lamp production facility is heavily limited by the copper cable inserter, and right next to it the hot air pipe is not connected properly. This native flora patch is almost gone. I don't know who built this burner at my niobium mine. What a stupid mistake. I make a lot more coke than my 2 trains can transport. But for more trains running without hiccups, I need a creative solution, because my rail design doesn't include stackers. And I do want big electric poles when expanding the rail network, so I better start making some. This is an extra 100 acetylene per second, with as little effort as possible. It takes any surplus coke from coal distillation and shares the train station. The city block design is just great. There's always enough space in a city block nearby to squeeze in a few extra buildings. And I fill in the last missing pieces for power. Now it is in perfect ratio, with 8 coal power plants to 5 heat exchangers and steam turbines. The single duralumin smelter in my mall can't keep up with the high demand for the expensive buildings. So I bring in molten copper to upgrade to the better recipe. A lot better recipe. With the obvious bottlenecks being resolved, it's time to start working towards the next big milestone. Arqads, the killer bees. For those I will need some natural gas. So I produce some drilling fluid and open up a bitumen sieve with a natural gas derrick. I quickly add some spaghetti to my mall, because those big poles require a lot of tin. The boron trioxide is almost running out. It's time for another manual delivery. Since I'm here, I can also add an inserter for glassware, so that I can upgrade to the next recipe later, without another visit. The buffer of batteries is gone. Time for a proper build on the rail network. I already make all of the ingredients in good quantities, except maybe melamine, but the buffer at the rail station is enough for now. I need another upgrade in my mall. These big electric poles are not produced fast enough. I already have over 600 ghosts, and every new city block will add more. The buffer of iron ore at this train station has run out. On purpose, I might add, because in the long run I plan to transport the molten metals by train. So I clean up the steel production and reduce the chaos in my starter base. The last update of the mod pack removed the ingredient limit on burner assembling machines. So I'm more than happy to start my bot mall, mostly for trains and mechanical parts. However, I set very low limits to not consume all of my resources and stop important production by doing so. I finally have enough simple circuit boards for signals and enough big electric poles to start upgrading my rail blocks to their final design. It took almost an hour to walk along the rail tracks and let my personal construction bots do their job. I'm not a fan of covering the whole base in a huge logistic network, building thousands of rubber ports and construction bots. Also, I had to replace some mining drills that I've been running out of resources. Stone bricks are important for the absurd amount of automation science that is required. I need more power. In this stage of the game, more coal is the easiest solution. The coal patch is conveniently large, so that I don't have to care about processing the coal before using it. This is just the first quarter of my planned power plant. I designed it to provide some byproducts in case I need them. Coal dust, soot and iron oxide. Does it look a bit too large? No, because I also need more hot air. And as I use more hot molten salt for hot air, I lose power production in my previous power plant. I'm not happy about my tin production. I was kind of forced to build that abomination to not be bottlenecked, but it is not future-proof. So I built a proper tin production block. It might be pure luck that I upgraded my power before building a few of these electric boilers, or not. The first Rauch Mark II took 7 hours, but the second took only 6 additional minutes. So I restore my Rauch production and add a simple reproduction loop to make more Mark II Rauchs. These big power poles are definitely not cheap. I had to refill some of those boxes. Some of my early train stations are still using mechanical inserters. The train for tin is not delivering the plates fast enough, so it's time for an upgrade here. I'm still hesitant to upgrade everything at once, because this is my non-existent stockpile of simple circuit boards. I'm voiding so much tailings at the moment. I could make some Nexalit from it instead. I built this next to the Nexalit resource patch, to only have one train station for Nexalit later. I add one more train for coke, so that there are always 2 trains loading, 2 unloading and 1 driving around. At least in theory. But the real problem is that I consume more coke than I produce. So I finish this tar refining block and add another 2 trains for coke. I'm a big fan of coke from tar refining, because the buildings are so much cheaper than the alternative, and because of all those juicy byproducts. Another 15 minutes to finish the rail blocks in the southern part of my base. I add production of glassware and optical sets to my block for glass products. I also increase production of glass itself, even though the buffer is already full. I hope to not come back here for some time. I don't need these items immediately, but I can use the time to my advantage and build up a nice buffer of them. My 10 logistic bots are working really hard, but I will need more, especially for what I'm planning to build here. So I automate rubber belts and logistic bots. I have made enough Mark II routes for one full building, so I increase the speed of this reproduction loop. It's still slow, but not as painfully slow as before. I've got most of the low-hanging fruits. Now it's time for the biggie, arqads. I built an automated bot-based production of everything that is needed to make arqads and their eggs. I have enough space where my labs once stood, and I also deconstruct the build for automation science packs. I have a few thousand of those in my mall, and if they run out, I will go out and fetch a few from my rail-based production. There's a lot I need. cDNA, the DNA samples, and the codecs. I helped kickstart this whole thing by putting a few stacks into these boxes by hand. There aren't many logistic bots around yet. Why all of that? Because of the dreaded arqad queen. I need to make a queen to get their natural reproduction loop started. But the recipe to make queens has only a 1% chance for success. And it needs natural gas, made from the raw gas I set up earlier, honey and arqad nests. The nests are made from rauks with their food, some empty combs, which are easy to make, more honey and arqad maggots. The maggots are made from more rauks, more honey and arqad eggs. And the eggs are made in the creature chamber, until I have my first queen. At least I get one arqad module on top, for each cycle in the creature chamber. The honey is made from honeycombs, which are made with the help of Ulrichs. The honeycombs loop back nicely, besides the ones needed for the maggots. The empty honeycombs are made from oleochemicals, Relesia and Bodos spores. There are enough oleochemicals in a tank for making glycerol for explosives. The empty combs are made from simple stuff and some items that I have collected in chests. Coal dust from my power plant and tailings dust from making Nexilite. It could easily take many hours until I have my first queen, so I automate everything, besides bringing in the resources by train. This initial setup is so slow that trying to get it started with belts would take several hours to fill the belt buffers. That's not feasible for this speedrun, so I have to rely on bots. As you can see, arqads are a huge milestone to be reached, and many actions in the past were made as preparation for this moment. But be warned, the way to make the empty honeycombs has changed in a later update of the mods. Oh, I almost forgot. I have selected the rauk upgrade for 15% productivity. This will help me both in this bootstrapping process as well as later in the real build. It's time for aluminium on rails. This is not a huge build, but processing a full belt of aluminium ore needs a huge amount of coke. So I built 2 train stations, just to be sure. A double station here and there is something I will happily build, if that allows me to get rid of stackers everywhere. This situation will only improve if I use fast inserters, which are still too expensive for spamming them everywhere, or with the inserter capacity upgrade, just before the chemical science pack. For the cost of some pure sand and a few other buildings, I can increase production of molten glass by quite a bit. The pure sand needs a lot of buildings, but by using direct insertion and accepting to not move through it, I could build it pretty compact. I add a bit of moss for more moss gene samples. They are needed for cDNA and for more dinosaurs digging Nexilite. Unfortunately, I have chosen a pretty bad location, but past me didn't care about that. Copper plates join the rank of resources that a single train can't deliver anymore, so another train it is. I had connected only a single column of coal distillation to the coal gas output, but my new huge mining operation needs a bit more. The niobium pipes are a clear indication of me not thinking ahead enough when designing this initially. My simple circuit production was busy, and I have enough to complete the block for antimony oxide. And immediately afterwards I built some smelters for those annoying alloys to consume all of the antimony oxide. I can use this production on rails to supplement my mall so that I can make more shafts. They are not needed for science at the moment. Nickel and duralumin for vitrolloy are still missing on rails. but the vitrolloy is not as important as the iron nexylate antimony special alloy. I simply don't want to come back here later just to place a single smelter. One belt of borax doesn't cut it anymore. I need to shuffle things around a bit to leave enough space for the rail blocks. And since I've already started, I walk along all rails in the northern part of my base to finish all the rail blocks. Another 30 minutes lost because I refuse to build a huge logistic network. I still have this annoying block surrounded by rails. Deforestation could easily take 10 minutes alone. I decline, but I can add a small build for mass production of lamps, or rather not mass production, because I currently have 4 stations waiting for copper plates, but only 2 trains. Luckily, the production of logistic science packs is not affected by the lack of copper plates. I make one last manual delivery of boron trioxide and deconstruct the temporary setup. More cleanup. I deconstruct the temporary train station for lamps and bring more routes into my starter base for the killer bees. I totally overbuilt boron trioxide, but now is a good time for that. I have just upgraded borax production and my power network is currently not struggling. Once the chests have filled up, this build will run idle most of the time. I'm handcrafting buildings for the next build. When the unbelievable happens. My first arqad queen, after only 20 cycles. So I quickly stop the expensive creature chamber and the production of more queens. Don't waste any resources. I will come back to the arqad soon. I got really lucky and needed only 20 tries. But to be honest, it doesn't really matter, because I still invested all that time to make the system fully automated. This build converts native flora into orcs. At this stage, producing the food is not really worth it in my opinion. I have to make room for the massive reproductive complex, repurpose the old queen maker to make arqad modules, and add an improvised production of red hot coke, as well as some biomass and sap. The rest is done by the bots. Now, this will start to make more arqad eggs and more arqad modules. Having these extras will come in handy when building the real arqad block on rails later. I'm so prepared to load an old save in case the queen dies early, but luckily I don't have to. With the arqad milestone reached, I can fully concentrate on producing the Pi Science Pack 2. Phytoplankton in a considerable amount is required for that. But I also need to scale up logistic science packs. They are currently produced at 8 per minute, and they are the bottleneck for the Py2 milestone. And I have to scale up the rest of the base to be able to continue in this pace. One belt of iron ore is no longer enough. So I build the second half of the iron block, this time including the centrifuges. I need more casting machines too, but that will have to wait for a bit longer. I set up production of the first 2 frass. I quickly built 2 more rail blocks. Up here I'm planning my slaughtering complex. Let's start with Ulrichs and continue with orcs. Why here? Because this area with big lakes on both sides might become a bottleneck for train traffic in the future. I don't know exactly, but I want to build something here that doesn't need high throughput. I'm doing some maintenance here and there, nothing really noteworthy, besides producing 4 more construction bots. I had already left 1 in my starter base, and I will leave a few more at future builds. For example, I leave one construction bot here, because I finally want to upgrade my Rauch production, but I'm still a few short. This is a simple build for poor alien samples. This time with bone meal from Ulrichs, instead of cooked bones. I bring boron trioxide to my Py2 science pack production. This will cut down the rubber demand a bit. I build a large casting block for all kinds of metals and alloys. Even though it doesn't cover all needs, it is at least a bit future-proof. Of course, there's iron and copper. Zinc and nickel are not working, because I don't make the molten yet. Aluminium, tin and lead are already running. For the solder, I import the tar and make the rest here. For the steel, I import coke and oxygen. For the future, I have planned titanium, stainless steel, maxillite, chromium, silver, supersteel, and a few more alloys on the right side. Only time will tell whether that single big block was a good idea. With iron plates being made on rails, I can change this iron station at my mall to bring in more iron instead of delivering it. This way my mall won't run out of the most basic resources. It's time for a small cleanup. I remove the sap extractors that were still left from my first simple circuit boards, and I try to utilize this other Rholesia plantation. The arqads require quite a bit of those. And I add a train for derailment, because some extra vitroloi would be nice. The last missing piece for vitroloi is molten nickel. This build processes a full yellow belt. A bit overbuilt for this stage, but that means that I don't need to upgrade it for quite some time. And I still miss oxygen for my steel production. The easiest way is to produce nitrogen and oxygen together. There's no need to build the whole block right now. I can extend this as needed. Did I already tell you that arqads need a lot of Rholesia? I quickly replace the 3 ghosts with real buildings to feed the bees. The time has come. My production of small parts in the mall doesn't cut it anymore. As long as I have enough plates coming in, it's easy to double the production. My niobium block is almost out of drill heads, and my arqads are out of Rauchs. Time for some manual deliveries. Oops. This trade station for iron plates is missing a combinator and the train limit. I must have forgotten it when changing this from a provider to a requester. It's easy enough to change, but the time to fix those small errors adds up quickly. My manure station is full, but manure is pretty valuable and I don't want this to stop. So I add more capacity for urea, so that the buffer at the urea station can fill up too. I built some manure bacteria and toothbrush. This will scale up slowly, but with construction bots delivering the finished modules, this happens automatically. This buffer of lead plates is almost full, and I need a few silver plates for genetically engineering some of the next animals. So I slapped down a single building. Some things can be so easy. I built some molten zinc. This does not consume a full belt, just enough to consume all the heavy oil that I make next door from kerogen. The additional small parts in my mall were not bad, but I actually need some small parts on my train network. Why use automated factories when burner assembler machines are so much cheaper and smaller? This will make my first Yeedle automatically. I clean up more of my old mess, bit by bit. This time the methane from the first simple circuit boards is on the agenda. This acetylene build doesn't have perfect ratios, but I can export all the red hot coke I'll ever need for my arqads, and it's enough acetylene for a while. And even though I don't use it yet, there's quite a bit of coke open gas to top up the leaking loop for hot air. This was too much for my power network, so I start building the next quarter of my coal power plant block. I have finally reached the point where my initial titanium production can't keep up anymore. So here we go, a full belt of ore being processed. My mall is running out of various products. Time for another manual delivery tour. Vitrolloy, iron oxalate antimony special alloy, tailings dust, rubber, Py2 dishes and glassware. Something must be wrong. I'm running out of rubber too fast. You gotta be kidding me. I forgot to limit the rubber belts. Well, that's 3,500 rubber wasted. Luckily, I produced quite a lot of rubber in the meantime. And this loss is only the equivalent of 1 hour of production. After some time, I have accrued enough resources to place down the 4 missing coal power plants. And I built the next rail block. What is it for? Plasmids. This is one biofactory producing plasmids non-stop. If it weren't for the massive amount of rubber that it needs. I built some biosamples that I need for good alien samples and the next science packs. I start building a dedicated block for Releasias and one for moon drops. The block for cotton guts can easily fit the amount of buildings that I currently need, but only because I bring in their nutrition by train. The massive slaughtering of animals has produced enough to easily start mass production of animal samples. But these are really thirsty for plasmids. Even though all the high frequency trains have dedicated fueling, the sheer amount of low frequency trains is too much for my 4 fuel stops. So I add a few more in a random block with enough space. The cotton guts are not moving yet. I decide to jumpstart this whole thing by bringing the chest of moon drops from my mall. Finally, I have everything on rails to build my planned 24 logistic science packs per minute. I leave the old 8 per minute running because research is still my main bottleneck. I finally separate hot air production from power generation. To the left of the coal patch, I make a lot of hot air now. And to the right, I have built another quarter of the power block. I finally make a convenient surplus of power. I have to hunt down one bottleneck after the other. Next up are Petri dishes, with so much seaweed that I build that in an adjacent block. And so much steam from electric boilers that I have to correct that surplus of power from convenient to just good enough. More Petri dishes need more molten glass. I have found a nice patch at the eastern border of my base. Just perfect. Rubber will be a bottleneck for quite some time. I have a good buffer of rauks, so I decide to slaughter them. One more slaughterhouse over here and one more column for latex. I better start mass producing fish. There is nothing special about this build, except that it's a huge upgrade from what I currently make in my mall. I void the wastewater, but already built the evaporator to make some urea from it later. I just miss the research for it. I need some fish as fish, but I also need a bit of the precious fish oil. On my way back to the mall, I grab a few more Brauks and Ulrichs for my killer bees. How could I miss to build this pipe? My plan of stockpiling rubber is not executed without flaws. Since I don't want to use naphtha to mine rare earth ore from a resource patch, I have to go out quite a bit to mine the ore from a rock. The building needs fast inserters, which require iron niobium alloy, so I make some of that in my mall. Yeah, that's a few rails. And don't ask me how I knew where to look for it. I also need copper ore and nickel ore on the train network. What for? Cobalt fluoride. I need just a little bit. In fact, if I overproduce, it will drain all cyanic acid that I produce. Therefore, this build is deliberately bottlenecked by the single mechanical inserter taking copper and nickel ore from the belt. Next up on my way towards the next science pack is artificial blood. Just a few drops per second. By the time I finish this build for Corlex food, the Corlex research is also finished. I already know where my fish oil is going to vanish. The first Corlex needs some fetal serum. That's what the silver plates were for. And artificial blood. I've built a very temporary train station to fill a few barrels of that liquid and carry them manually to the creature chamber. I don't want to waste a single drop. By the way, somewhere along the way I made a few dinosaurs while the creature chamber was idle. I also built a little bot fed setup to breed more Corlex. I only need 60 of them for science. There is no need to slaughter them. This sparely filled city block produces more than enough fertilizer. There is nothing special about it. Of course I use the recipe with seaweed. It is so much cheaper than all the alternatives. For the last 6 hours, my first Yeedle was waiting patiently for this moment. I always wanted to make some fertilizer in the bot mall to make enough modules, but I never found the time to do that. So now I have to leave a construction bot behind. This actually works pretty well. Next up are sea sponges. Compared to Corlex, they are very easy. While waiting, I already built 2 empty rail blocks. This small build makes enough sea sponges. Actually, 1 sponge culture building would be enough. But I like to have a bit more to make modules for future expansion. The time has come. I move my arqads and scale them up properly. Of course, I bring all the eggs and combs I have accrued to fill a bit of the belt buffer. I also have a few hundred arqads left, which I don't need as modules. This is great, because this build will not produce with full speed until I throttle the queen production. This wired inserter will limit the buffer to approximately 20 arqad queens. More than enough to not fear the collapse of the colony. I was thinking about using logistic bots for the queens, but decided against it. It felt weird to have a single block with a permanent logistic network. Just like the first Corlex, the first Scipio needs a few drops of liquid artificial blood. This is the last species of alien life that I need for the Pi Science Pack 2. With a mix of spaghetti and bots, I also start their reproduction loop. While waiting, I build a single slaughterhouse for the bees to extract their venom. The arthropod blood becomes important later. I avoid any overflow of that, but I'll likely jump in and build another tank before that happens. I only have 1/3 of the required Corlex modules yet, but I need to make ends meet and progress nevertheless. This block feeds them fish, tephra and their food to produce some milk and process some of that milk to casein. Again, the wastewater byproduct is directly converted to urea. There is another pipe missing? Really? That seems to happen when I leave the production site before it starts producing. Unfortunately, for my speedrun, this is the only way. I already built this block for Zipia eggs. It just needs 6 modules, but I still don't have them. I'll bring them later. The Pi Science Pack 1 is still not scaled up to match the planned production of Pi Science Pack 2. Until now. But I shouldn't forget, the main goal is to set a new speed record, so I must continue working towards Py2. This build for good alien samples was really annoying to build, because of the many train stations. It might look ugly, but it works. By the way, it is deliberately bottlenecked by microfiber, to not overuse the rest of the resources. I stand corrected. It does not work. I placed an overflow valve when it should have been an underflow valve. It's really annoying that I need that at all. But the looping fluids tend to constantly lose a tiny amount, which adds up over time. Cytostatics, a single building that creates a huge issue. One cytostatics item needs 6 plasmids, so the short belt buffer to the train station alone is worth a few hundred plasmids, which I don't have. I really should have taken the easy way and built most of Py2 in my mall, fed by bots. But on principle, I make them on rails. I try my best to limit that inserter, but it's really difficult to produce exactly 16 items per hour consistently. I build the block for producing the Pi Science Pack 2, even though I haven't researched it yet. Now I just have to wait for the sweet milestone. Except there is still one thing missing. I don't make mechanical parts outside my mall. I was prepared to simply drop a few of them into the train station, but as it seems, I have the time to build a more automated solution. I actually overproduce all of it by a good amount, except the shafts, which have enough space to expand. When all the buffers have filled up, I can theoretically ship the extras into my mall. Unfortunately, I'm out of the iron Nexalit antimony special alloy, because I'm out of Nexalit plates. The production from tailings just isn't great, but I made a few dinosaurs to dig up extra Nexalit ore. Their production is difficult to calculate exactly, and I hate to not know how much my factory is capable of, so I go the easy way and restrict their speed by using only a single mechanical inserter for outputting the Nexalit ore onto the belt. This last research takes a long time, so I use the time to prepare the train station at my labs and scale up plate production of the most basic resources. The iron plates are actually limited by this casting machine, but the copper plates are limited by not having enough molten copper. Unfortunately, that's not so easy to fix. To keep my mall central, I start expanding to the south with an empty rail block for my most bottlenecked resource, rubber. And more rubber requires more routes. While building that block, the technology finally finishes researching, and I make my first Pi Science Pack 2 in record-breaking time. I really try to build this in a future-proof way. I can upgrade the reproductive complex to use native flora and food, when upgrading the Rauk paddocks to use quality food and bedding. But this is still a long way ahead. With the milestone reached, I finally update my mods. The first big change involves Rholesia. They got their most basic recipe removed, so the internal names of recipes got all mixed up. I had to correct every Rholesia plantation I had, either by adding soil and hydrogen, or by changing back the recipe. The second big change is the wax loop for arqads. The recipe to make empty honeycombs was removed, and instead they are made from wax. Wax can be made from the used combs. The slight loss in the loop can be topped up by making empty combs with the unchanged old recipe. Getting the first empty honeycomb is also a bit different now, but I'm not concerned by it because I'm past that point. Building all these new city blocks put a lot of pressure on my power network. It's time to complete the coal power plant block. It looks a lot better now. I also built some kickalk in a dedicated block. Kickalk always takes such a long time to fill the belt buffers. And here I make microfiber, lots of it, for filtration media. And with that, most of my new kickalk production is already gone again. For more rubber, I need more latex. Of course. The rubber bottleneck is serious. After deconstructing my miniature latex built near the mall, I built another block of routes. That's the first time that I built an exact copy of an existing city block. Of course, I also need to expand the slaughterhouses. That should be everything to resolve the rubber bottleneck, at least for now. It's really difficult to find a good end for this video, because I could just continue building one block after another. But I'm going to stop here now. The last 25 hours went by quickly, but what can I expect from the future? The next big milestone will be complex circuit boards, unlocked by a technology called basic electronics. The developers should make up their mind. Are they complex or are they basic? Nevertheless, this should take over 20 hours of research. Maybe a bit more if I can't keep up science production. Unfortunately, there aren't many goodies available with Py2, except the bot speed upgrade, which I already researched. The good atomizer recipes are unlocked at the very end, same as the inserter capacity upgrade. There are a few alien life upgrades early in the tech tree, but if I take all of them, I can forget reaching my next speedrunning goal: complex circuit boards before the 100-hour mark. As you could see, Pyanodons is a really simple mod. You just build one thing after another, and in the end it all comes together. All jokes aside, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and may your factory grow.